Hi everybody, Loryan Strant here from Regarding 365. You'll notice our new name. We're no longer regarding Office 365, as 365 is everything these days. So I'm joined with fellow MVP Simon Terry. Hi Simon.
Hi, Hi, everyone.
And our guest today is James Robertson from Step 2. Hi
Hello.
Robert. So what we're going to be talking about today is employee experience, and I guess why this matters, why we care. I tend to think, hey, here's some tools, just do stuff. No, actually I don't. But James, can you start us off with, I guess you've come from a strong background of SharePoint and working with organizations, and not to say that that's what you guys do, but you've seen a lot of bad SharePoints, a lot of bad products, and yes, I said SharePoints because we use it as a word these days. Tell us where organizations get this stuff wrong from an employee experience when they develop new intranets.
Look, I mean, I've been in this space 20 years now, and what we have seen is a steady progression of two things. I mean, steadily better technology capabilities and steadily greater knowledge and capabilities of teams who are delivering these solutions. However, I think the challenge at the moment is that we are being cursed by success. That is, the stuff that Microsoft and others are delivering is really good. I mean, the capabilities are getting richer, deeper, and broader every day. However, more stuff does not magically equal simpler. And this is the challenge, is that real people, actual staff within organizations have jobs to get on with. Should that involve a use of collaboration tools and online platforms? Absolutely. But giving them 30 tools and saying good luck is probably not enough. So that's where I guess the whole employee experience thing comes in.
And do you think it's one of the challenges that I'm seeing, I'd be curious to see what you think as well, is products like Office 365 or tool sets like Office 365, because they've historically been technology-based platforms. Like obviously we started off with Exchange and SharePoint and OCS and Live Meeting, but now obviously Skype for Business. So IT still tends to think that they own and will choose when the organization gets it, whereas the organization's actually out there just saying, well, I want to communicate this way. Let's go get Slack. Let's go get Dropbox. Let's go get Trello, and kind of bypassing IT. So kind of IT needs to catch up. What are your thoughts?
Look, I do think that we've now got an age of what I call enlightened IT in a lot of organizations, where they see that there is a need to be met, and there is, and that, yes, people are going off and doing shadow IT, but that's largely not because they don't like real IT, but because they haven't had their needs met. And so I do think enlightened IT is starting to tackle that, and they see that there is a bigger, more strategic picture. And I think that they see that the idea about user experience, employee experience, and the concept, I guess, of that the digital workplace as a broader thing is something that they're kind of putting their hands up for, in part because no one else necessarily is, but because actually I do think that IT is well placed these days to step back into a strategic role. The challenge, of course, is, well, what does that mean in practice? What are we actually going to deliver to staff, and how do we give them good advice around stuff? And the market is changing so quickly. Obviously, we were just talking before, the three of us, before we came on this call, about, you've now got WhatsApp, which is for business, and obviously, Workplace by Facebook and Office 365, and Google has just announced a whole new set of tools as well. So there's a real churn technology-wise, but we still have to deliver simple, frictionless, productive, coherent experiences for staff.
James, one of the things you've done very well across Step 2 and in your practice around intranets is stress the importance for intranet managers of having a plan and clear business value they're trying to achieve. When you look at this broader employee experience space, What are you seeing are the key things people are looking to put on those plans? What are you encouraging people to work with as they move into the employee experience space?
I think it's interesting. I mean, the default starting point, particularly for collaboration tools, is often in head office, and it's with the C-suite and their engagement with the organisation, which is fine. But actually, I see the greatest value in most organisations is in the front line.
Yep.
And that's where, as you say, Simon, the business value is really evident in terms of, bank staff in branches providing service to customers, people in call centres, salespeople out on the road, nurses in hospitals. They're the ones that have the real need. For 11 years now, we've run our Intranet Digital Workplace Awards, and it's consistently in the front line where we see staff that we previously thought, well, not them, obviously, later. We'll go to them later. They don't have desktops. It's all hard. We won't do them now. But actually, a lot of them are going, yeah, we started without you because we see the need. If you want to catch up, that's fine. We're already collaborating. And so it's fascinating the way organisations are shifting at the moment.
Yeah, and I think you're calling out there something that, a lot of the investment people have put into people experience to date has gone to those head office staffs. It's been activity-based workplaces. It's been, designed for the desktop. That field or frontline or customer-facing workforce is often the forgotten team in terms of employee experience. And so what sort of things do you think are making a big difference for people as they step forward into that employee experience?
Look, I think the leading organisations are doing a few things. I mean, first off, they're providing a clear enterprise front door. And so it's an entry point that allows them to make sense of what's available and directs them to everything from how to apply to leave to how to co-create documents. And that's not provided out of the box by any of the vendors. So there is work around that. And that was your classic, so your modern intranet and your modern intranet homepage. Beyond that, what I see in the work that we're doing step 2 is that people are getting value out of collaboration when they're solving customer problems. When they have a customer come, ring in and say, my health insurance plan is this, I've got this particular situation, and, I joined at this date and I'm confused. I moved across from New Zealand and I had this thing and I brought across this and I'm of a certain age, and the person answering the call is like, well, I don't know. Now, historically, they would have just turned to their team leader and said, what do you reckon?
Yeah.
Which is, of course, why you can ring up a call center 3 times and get 3 different answers. But nowadays, I think some of the leading organizations are starting to say, well, I'll just keep chatting to the customer while I type away and get that input from others to go, oh, actually, I was going to say A, but it turns out B is the answer. And so they're giving quicker answers, they're giving better answers, and because it's public, everyone else goes, actually, I thought it was A too, but actually we're supposed to say B.
I've talked a little bit about creating a public source of error instead of a public source of truth, because as people bring those myths out into a public forum, then the actual experts in the organisation can engage and fix and also learn where their messages are not connecting, especially with frontline teams who are actually the ones responsible for executing. It's a great point, James. Well made.
Look, I think there's also an ethical responsibility, which I don't think has been talked enough about, which says that organisations have an ethical responsibility to support their staff. Now, in a lot of organisations that have, frontline and field workforce, they have been treated as second or even third class citizens. They don't have email, they don't have a desktop, they're not being given a device. Communication to them is via their managers or stuff stuck on a post-it, on a pin board. Now, if you're a bank and you've got tens of thousands of staff in frontline environments, or if you're a hospital, or, if you, an airline, then holy heck, you may be in a situation where the majority of your staff are not actually adequately supported. And so I think there's a real ethical responsibility as well as a practical one to say, we are going to support these stuff. Now, now that we've got these modern tools, we're not going to just focus on head office. We're actually going to deliver them out. And that's often via mobile, obviously, and other similar approaches.
I love the case study from your Step 2 conference, not last year, but the year before, of Australia Post and how they created a public internet page for their employees. Because so many of their employees and contractors and franchisees and others just didn't have the system access. And so they actually sought to solve that by really designing an experience that reached everyone. It was a great case study. So
yeah, and I think that one of our winners of the awards a couple of years ago was Coles. And that was them using Office 365 to deliver a solution out to 100,000 staff across Australia. And it was BYOD because, they're not going to give people packing shelves, a corporate mobile. But what was fascinating was that they did not do an Office 365 project. They did not do an intranet project. The project was actually run by a team whose title was Employee Engagement. Mm-hmm. And so they actually delivered an employee engagement project. Now, obviously, they did deliver Office 365 and they did deliver an intranet, plus a bunch of other capabilities. But that wasn't the driver, to your point, Simon. They had a very clear idea of where they wanted to get, their value out of the project, what the drivers were. And you could see it in the results because, they had to make usage of that platform optional.
Yeah.
You can't force people to use their personal email addresses, but yet everyone did because it worked well.
Do you see a leaning towards these organisations that actually embrace focusing on an employee experience because they recognise the importance of that frontline capability and engagement? Because if we talk about the last two organisations that the two of you mentioned, Coles and Australia Post, organisations of tens of thousands of people, and in some of the other awards that you've given out have been banks and telcos, and again organisations with significant employee bases. Do you see that they are doing these innovations in their intranets and their communication platforms and other things like activity-based working and whatever else? As opposed to the more mid-market that have less, or they're more sensitive to the investment they make in their employee engagement?
I think that environment is changing completely. I mean, historically, only the big companies saw the need, and only the big companies had the money and resources to do this stuff. And they saw that customer experience has to be driven by a powerful employee experience. And that the better you support employees, the better customer needs are being met. But with the platforms that we've now got, I mean, we're seeing it certainly in the awards, organisations of 100 people or 500 people have leapfrogged all of the clunky stuff and have gone, well, we can just deliver this, right? They can use an out-of-the-box intranet solution. They can do things on Office 365 or with Workplace by Facebook. And all of this stuff is massively easier. And in fact, we see that it's actually easier to do leading-edge stuff now in smaller organizations than in big ones.
Yeah.
Because the big ones, as Simon would experience as well, are pretty heavy on, bureaucracy, and, it's a huge ship to turn. Because what have you seen, Simon, in terms of big organizations versus small?
Look, I think the scale is the issue that big organizations have as an advantage in terms of it creates a rationale and a value story and a budget. It's also the disadvantage in terms of execution. So you've got those two there. What I see now with medium and sometimes smaller organizations is this is actually an imperative. Employee experience, because traditionally small organizations always struggled with keeping employees around, giving them development opportunities, giving them chances to feel like it was worth staying, because that cost of turnover is so high for medium and small organizations. with these new tools, you can offer your employees the opportunity to work flexibly. You can offer them, the best employee experience in the world in terms of the tools to execute their roles. And that actually becomes a very attractive, competitive offering, especially when you're trying to recruit smart young millennials, you're trying to get into technology, you're trying to do things in different ways. I'm seeing a lot of demand at that level in small to medium organizations, particularly at the more entrepreneurial end, but across the suite now, as people say, no, we've got to be the best in this, because if we're not, the employees will just go somewhere else where they get, the ability to work more effectively. We can't make them use fax machines anymore. That's a healthcare example, for example. The healthcare still uses fax machines, right? So there's real issues in some of those areas.
So what about?
And it's funny. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, we won 2 new clients. One of them was a 120,000 person global pharmaceutical company. And I'm flying off to Switzerland in a couple of days to do that work. The same day, we won a project with a 30-person organization that runs a parenting website.
Yep.
And they both had equally legitimate needs. And we will do a little bit less of the smaller one, but not an order of magnitude less. So it's fascinating. I mean, the organizations are 4 organizations of magnitudes different in size, but they're sure as heck not that different in terms of their needs.
So what about then industries? So one of the examples again was Australian Post, which is publicly owned but kind of operates as a private organisation because ultimately it serves consumers. But what about I guess state, federal, local government, councils, agencies, those kind of things? Have you seen that they're starting to get the shift, or do they kind of still sit on their hands a bit and go, well, you know what? We're not really ready to do this stuff. We see it's important, but we'll get there one day.
What are you seeing, Simon? Why don't you kick this off?
I've certainly seen a big step forward in that sector around the whole design disciplines, focusing on, stakeholder experience quite holistically. I think there's a very strong theme across most branches of government now about user-driven policy, stakeholder experience. And I think that outward push does cause them to reflect on their employee experience, the way their teams are working and driving to it. I haven't personally seen a rush of clients in that space, but I'm certainly seeing that conversation be more active. I know others who are doing a lot in that realm. So I think it often depends upon the nature of the government climate in whatever state or local council area you're in. But it's certainly, I think there's a bigger drive from that kind of design ethos towards employee experience.
So here's a question then. Again, we're talking historically about technology solutions, but when we're talking about employee experience, we're talking beyond IT. So if, let's say, we are talking about a mid-market that's kind of woken up, be it a public sector organisation or a private sector mid-market that's decided to go on, oh, we now care about employee experience. Who's usually leading that conversation? Is it the switched on CIO who says, I want my tools to do more than just provide emails and files and phone calls? Or is it the HR or people and culture department? Who's usually leading this conversation?
I mean, so look, we see that there are 3 main stakeholders in any organisation of size. There is IT, there is HR, and there is internal communications. Now, obviously, IT have historically owned the platforms, and for the last, 5+ years, internal comms has owned the internet, and largely HR has been silent, but quiet, just heads down. That dynamic is changing, I think, in a lot of organisations. I mean, we're seeing that the HR is waking up. And they're often the drivers around employee experience. in that broader non-technological sense, and that overlaps with the culture piece, which is potentially a mix of HR and internal comms, and obviously IT is now saying, hey, we've got things like Office 365. We see that there is now a push to deliver better solutions, and they're starting to talk digital workplace, although sometimes only from a technology perspective. Now, as to who ends up, owning it, that varies. In small organisations, I think, we see that the CEO has a strong engagement, and that they're absolutely actively involved in this stuff because they're much more connected with their organisations at a smaller scale. At a bigger level, I mean, no doubt, like Simon, we're talking with senior leaders in the big banks and other big corporations. They're super interested. They don't really know what it's all about yet. They've heard about digital workplace. They've heard about employee experience. They know they have to do something. And they're all very, very interested. As yet, getting them all in the same room to sort stuff out is still not easy.
Yep.
And I think that's where bigger organisations will end up doing more, but will be slower off the blocks in many instances.
I think there's an interesting point that you've called out there, James, which is to really deliver employee experience, you've actually got to connect that stream of people experience with the stream of communications with the underlying platforms, processes, and technologies. And traditionally, and I've done a bit of work earlier this year with a couple of different HR teams, just helping them think through how their role shifts in this. Because what they traditionally used to doing is saying, this is the people experience, now everybody else just line up to this. And of course, that doesn't work when technology has its views which may not be aligned, when other processes, and often in HR you talk about outsourced processes or processes embedded in SAP or other ERP systems that don't align to your target experience. If HR doesn't start, or whoever's leading doesn't start to take that role of weaving across those three streams, then they won't deliver the outcomes they're looking for.
Well, I think on that point, Simon, something you kind of alluded to there is what a lot of people would be calling digital transformation. But a lot of people talk about it just being paper to electronic, and thinking that that's transformation, that's sufficient. Is when we talk about employee engagement, is digital transformation as a fluff term? Because in all honesty, I personally believe it's a fluff term. Is it clouding the conversation because everyone's thinking digital transformation is about me, or are people actually embracing it as a broader picture and saying, no, it's actually about everybody coming together, the people, the culture, the technology, the facilities, the process, everything coming together?
I think it's definitely about the latter. And all terms that become as popular as digital transformation have some element of hype in them. And I think, we need to always remember that, and we need to remember their marketing terms. But, what I am seeing at the positive end of the spectrum is organizations that are genuinely taking on what being digital means through every part of their organization, are realizing step changes in their performance, in the way they think about their business, in terms of where they focus their people, how they support and engage them. And that for me, so I would hate to see someone, the time to turn paper into digital was the 1990s. If you are still doing that as your digital transformation project now, the end is nigh. The time now is to actually be rethinking your entire business model, processes and engagement, and the way your people play a critical role for customers in that. That's what, late teens digital transformation means for me. So, James, you'll have seen as much, if not more, of this in the work you do.
Yeah, look, I agree with you, Simon. I mean, there's that element of hype, and And for goodness sake, let's not talk about digital disruption. Oh, it drives me crazy. Look, I think there are some really practical examples. So Simon's mentioned one, which is around customer service. And actually, a lot of the work we do in Step 2 is going off and doing field research and going off and spending time in stores, in the frontline environment. And the needs there are really obvious, and they're often very poorly met. And so there's a real opportunity there. But we take this at the other end. So I think staff induction is a perfect example. It's super concrete. What is your experience when you first join the organization? When you turn up, it's everything from, do you have a desk? Do you have equipment on that? But more than that, are you helped to digitally understand the organization? Are you connected up proactively with other people that are going to help build your skills? And then, how, maybe even that experience starts before day one.
Yeah.
What if, when people are employed, but before they first started, they're actually doing induction themselves online because they're already given access, obviously not to everything, but to a bunch of stuff. And you've only got to look at people's experiences in most organizations when they start, which is terrible, to say that not only should we be helping people, but it sends a powerful message. It says, yes, we're going to help you, but also we're expecting you to be productive quickly.
Yep.
We're not expecting you to take the first year to work out how to use the photocopier and who to talk to if you need a box of pencils. We're going to make that simple for you so that you can get stuck into your job as quickly as possible. And
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's the win-win. I mean, that's the win for the employee and in levels of engagement, which at the moment are terrible across most organizations. But it's a win for the organization because actually they're doing money-earning work quicker, better, more accurately. So it's often that, it's take those opportunities to say, let's carve off, a bit induction. And let's get the right people around the room, around the one table and say, what do we need this to look like? And that's not hard to work out.
I had one, James, recently. I was doing some work for a client, very large organization. The net result of the project was we realized how difficult it was for them to integrate me into their processes and their workflow. And they realized they actually needed a project to think about how in the future of work they would manage, mobile, flexible workforces, contractors, consultants and others in ways that actually maximize their value. And, there are so many organizations, especially that have large contractor forces or large, other, temporary labor forces that realize they waste a lot of time and make their experience quite challenging.
Yeah.
Actually, just thinking back to that point about employee induction, it's something that really sets the tone for how people work, and I think it also comes down to also contractors and how they engage. And one of the things that I find fascinating is seeing all these posts on LinkedIn about people taking a photo of their desk with the Apple, the Mac, and the branded swag, and saying thanks for a wonderful first day. It's like, right. Well, obviously the marketing comms team got involved. But what were the system access like? I know a particular individual who started at a large insurance firm. And they had no official induction, and they didn't know what tools and systems to use. They basically were told, shadow this person for a few days. You're replacing them, so just do what they do. And then afterwards, and what happened was that the people on the culture team recognized that there was an issue there, and all of a sudden over-serviced that individual and kind of kept having regular catch-ups, like, hey, is everything okay? We just want to make sure that, you're okay. Whereas if a proper induction plan, regardless of tools and how it was used, if it was a SharePoint workflow, it was more about the fact there was an induction plan, would have actually given them a better experience instead of having to over-resource them to make sure they didn't then leave. But one thing I wanted to just in wrapping up, you guys both just mentioned previously the awards. So, James, can you tell us about the Step 2 awards? Because you actually mentioned before we started recording about, I think you're announcing some winners soon.
Yeah, look, so what we've run now for 11 years is a thing called the Internet and Digital Workplace Awards. And they're about uncovering the great stuff that people are doing around the globe that you would otherwise never have heard of, us included, bringing that into the light so that you can steal it. And in return, we give the winners a beautiful glass trophy. And that's a pretty good deal for everyone. And so this year's winners gets announced on Thursday. It's all very exciting. And yeah, look, I can tell you that there is some super nice stuff around Office 365 and around collaboration tools, particularly around change management, particularly around the adoption activities, which I think are showing a maturing of this space, which hopefully a lot of others will follow, and we'll start to see, a richer, more complete approach taken to all this stuff. So, keep your eyes out. It'll go out via the socials, as it were, and on our website. And we will be running a bunch of free sessions. 3 afternoon things to come and meet the winners and to see what's happening. And again, keep your eye out on the socials.
And so on that note, how can people find out about those awards and Step 2 and you on the socials?
Oh, that's an excellent question. No, you can come to our site, step2, steptwo.com.au, and there you can follow us, on LinkedIn or Twitter, there's a whole section of the site. So yeah, it's a very active space. We've been in this space a long time. What I love now is there is so much richer community. It's not just us talking about this stuff, which it was 20 years ago. There's a lot of really experienced folks like Simon and others who are doing brilliant work too. And so, I would say go out. If you are a practitioner and you are not keeping track of what Simon is saying or what we're saying and what others are saying, you're doing it wrong. So get out there, put your head up from the desk. And life is busy, but, make sure as a practitioner you're fully engaging with the rich options that the community now provides to support people and educate people. And there's some great stuff out there.
And so how can people actually follow you on the Twitters?
I'm on Twitter, James_step2. So you can find me there. Simon, what's your Twitter handle?
I'm Simon G. Terry.
Lovely.
Easy to find.
Your video is frozen right now, so we're looking at a very kind of need to cut out the lips and just put moving mouth in there. Well, thank you very much, James, for joining us. Thank you, Simon, for sitting in with me and having this conversation. Be sure to follow us on, I think we're regarding 365 on the Twitters and on the webs now, as we've just done the renaming leading up to Ignite. So yeah, more info soon.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.